Hello. Welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime. And I am your host, as always, Professor Prime. Welcome to the Power of Math series, the series where I talk about different concepts in math and how they're powerful, how they're useful, how they're important, and things that I might find interesting about them. And in this particular video, we're talking about the power of fractions. And as we do that proper, before we get into fractions, I want to talk about numbers as a whole. Take it away! So numbers. They are amazing things. They are objects that allow us to count, to measure, to label, to quantify things. They allow us to say something about this world. They allow us to communicate something about the universe. And when put in the right context, they allow us to say something about our past, something about our present, and they allow us to potentially say something about the future. Numbers are amazing things. And I want to start by talking about natural numbers and having that lead into where I want to go. So with natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on and so forth. They are powerful. They allow us to say a lot of things. And also, for some people, they might want to include 0 in that set. And fair enough. And no matter how you cut it, when we're dealing with natural numbers, when we're dealing with the whole numbers, the counting numbers, so to speak, they allow us to talk about a variety of situations. However, we might need other ways to represent situations in the real world. We might need a different way to talk about things. And one of the biggest ways that we can talk about things is talk about things in terms of parts of a whole. Interfractions. I know a lot of people hate them, but they are incredibly useful. So let's talk about them and then kind of talk about some other representations of parts of a whole, because we can't have this conversation about fractions properly unless we talk about decimals, unless we talk about percents, unless we talk about mixed numbers. And I kind of like have my feeling on each of those representations, but they all can mean the same thing, and it's just easier to convert certain things to other representations than another one. But that's another thing for another time. So let's get into it. What fractions? Let's start with talking about pizza, because I like pizza. It is awesome, and I kind of want some now. But if we're talking about fractions, right? If we look at a pizza and we talk about a whole pizza. Traditionally, we think about 8 slices. So if I take a slice of that pizza and I eat it, and I've taken that one slice out of 8 slices, I've eaten 1/8 of the pizza, and that gives me an idea of how much I've eaten, but it's also giving me an idea of how much is left. And of course, there's other things that can complicate that, like or other people there, and so on and so forth. But then if I take like 2 slices, right, and I eat those 2 slices, then I've now eaten 2 slices out of those 8 slices. I've eaten 2 slices now. 2/8 now. If I want to talk about that in a slightly nicer way, then I'd simplify that. In which case, it'd be 1 out of 4. So I've eaten 1/4 of that whole pizza. And with fractions, we can get a lot of mileage out of them. We're thinking about one number divided by another number, and we could talk about like, hey, I have this many parts out of this many parts. And there's a lot that you could do with that. And then you have other representations, and we can start with decimals. So I think with decimals, they're easier to deal with calculation-wise. If you're dealing with some particularly nasty fractions or just some unpleasant stuff. it could be useful or more convenient. And when we think about decimals, we think about you have a whole number, then you have a decimal, and then you have parts of another number, right? You have part of it. Um, and with that decimal, I grew up in America, so I'm used to seeing it represented by a dot or represented by a period, same thing. But if you grew up in Europe, then there's a good chance you saw it represented by a comma, and that's interesting. So if you're going from one place to another, it could be potentially confusing. But I just thought it was useful to know. But anyway, if I have something like 5 out of 2, I have a decimal representation of that. I have 2.5, right? It's just another way to talk about it. And the whole numbers, it's just like you have decimal representations of that too, right? Like for 2, 2.0, 2.00, so on and so forth, right? There's just different ways to talk about it like that. But the idea is you can play that game. And I think it's very useful for like calculations, and also just another way to look at things. And then you have percents, which I'd argue, like, I don't know, I feel like they're insanely useful and give us a good idea of what's going on, but I don't think that we go in depth with them. And depending on who you are, you might not even told what they are. Because, like, a percent, if you translate that, it's per 100. When you think per, you should be thinking division, right? And so, just give a quick example. If I'm given like 7%, then I'm thinking it's 7 parts out of 100. So it's 7 divided by 100. And then for a percentage, I could take what I have for the percent and multiply it by some number that I have, and that gives me a percentage. And both of these things can be useful. And when I look at the first thing that comes to mind with percent, if I'm looking at my battery, because I'm filming this on my cell phone, I'm at 75%. That gives me an idea of things, like how much charge do I have left. And so right now, all right, 75%, that's a decent amount. And so I'm not gonna charge it right off the bat, but I'm filming. It takes up more battery, and that's something to consider. But I do have my charger like behind me, so I'm good. But my whole thing is like they percents impart information. Same with any number, and they could be useful. They could be especially useful when you're talking about statistics, because a lot of people like will probably react better to those than like fractions or decimals. And again, like I like them. And then you have like mixed numbers, and I don't like them that much, but they're useful like in cooking. So like for instance, an example of a mixed number, like a 2.5. So like if I was cooking something and I need like 2.5 cups of milk, then that gives me a good idea of how many I need. Like I mean I could also say 2.5, but for some people it might be useful because they'll know, because like, hey, I need a cup, I need another cup, I need like half a cup. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then when I look at different ways to talk about things, like take my tea, if I had to like look and give an estimate, I'd say it's out of this glass, it's about 1/4 of a glass now. And for some people, I'm like, okay, I have a good idea of what that is. And then if we talk about like decimals, I could say that, hey, I have 0.25 glasses of tea here. And if I look at percents, I have 25% of my tea left. Or I have like 25% of tea. Oh, sorry, 25% of tea here. So I think those are pretty cool. Like, I don't want to ramble, so I'm gonna like wrap this up. My whole thing is just like there are a lot of ways that we use fractions, decimals, percents, and to me, a lesser extent, mixed numbers. And the whole idea is they talk about parts of a whole. They give us a way to talk about numbers between natural numbers. They give us a way to talk about numbers that are less than one and between zero. And if we bring negatives into the mix, that gives us a whole nother way to talk about things too, but that's for another video. So yeah, fractions. They're powerful because they allow us to say something about the universe. They give us a way to build off of what we can do with natural numbers. So I think that's pretty cool. And that being said, I'm gonna take this video, bring it to a close, and I'll see you in the next one. Professor Prime out.